Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Category Visionaries. Today we're speaking with Lucas Mendes, founder and CEO of Revelo, a tech talent platform that's raised $48.7 million in funding. Lucas, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Brad. It's a privilege to be here.
Yeah, really excited to have you here, and let's go ahead and jump right in. So first off, talk to us about the history of the company, the background of the company, and why you ended up starting it in the first place.
Sure. Revelo is actually my second startup. I'm a software engineer by training. I started my career in banking, moved to consulting. At some point, decided that I wanted to start my first business. That was an e-commerce company, and we sold that business to a private equity group. And during that first business, I had a really tough time hiring tech talent, not just finding and screening tech talent, but really, finding people who were really, at the right point of their careers that wanted to join my projects, right? So that's where the whole idea emerged for Revelo. We started out in 2014. I think we only incorporated in 2015. And the initial idea, the initial project was to focus on sourcing and curating tech talent for tech companies, basically. We started out with a focus on Latin America due to my connections to the region. I'm Brazilian by birth. I spent a lot of time down in Brazil, and that's where we started. We raised some money for that business, which was essentially a job board focused on developers. And then fast forward to COVID, we saw a lot of US companies interested in hiring tech talent from Latin America. That's where, remote became a thing and tech teams started being distributed as an org. And as I said, we started getting a lot of inbound interest from US companies who wanted to recruit talent from Latin America, but didn't really know where to start. And we basically answered that calling and pivoted the business into a nearshoring platform, which does not only the recruiting, but also payments, compliance, perks, benefits, health insurance, everything that you need to run your distributed tech team. We grew a lot. We grew 6x in 3 years. And more recently, we actually started getting interest from other types of companies who were looking for tech talent at scale. And those companies are hyperscalers and data platforms that are training LLMs. So it turns out that you need a lot of data generated by humans to fine tune your LLMs in a phase that's called the post-training phase of LLMs. And we are perfectly suited for that because we have access to a very large network of pre-vetted talent. Right now, it's something like 400,000 engineers that have been pre-vetted on our platform, and we can deliver that at scale. So yeah, that's our 10 years in 2 minutes.
Well, to break that up into some pieces, how intense was that COVID rush for you? I have to imagine, given the positioning that you had, that it was just insane.
It was a roller coaster. The first, I remember very well, from April to May 2020, our revenue dropped by something like 80%. We thought, well, we're screwed. We're done. Luckily, we had recently raised a round of capital, maybe 6 or 9 months before that. So we had a pretty full war chest. And that gave us the liberty to try things out. Basically, we're launching new products, trying new ways to serve our clients since, companies essentially stopped hiring from a month to the next. But then a couple of months later, we started getting that inbound demand. And, that's the up phase of the roller coaster. And we started saying, hey, now we have more demand than we can deal with. And all those layoffs that we had done a couple of months earlier, we wish we hadn't done them because now we needed the people to satisfy that demand. So yeah, it was very high highs and very low lows.
What about on the human data for LLM side? When did you start to see that was going to be an opportunity? And did you see that? Did you have customers coming to you? How did you know that was a market that you needed to serve?
Yeah, I wish I could claim credit for that, but it was, again, us responding to inbound interest from clients. Initially, what we saw was there were data labeling platforms that, help hyperscalers annotate data of various kinds, like images, video, language, text, etc., that were being asked to do the same for code data, but didn't really have the talent to deliver on that. And we're reaching out to companies like us who could deliver the talent. So yeah, initially we partnered with one of those companies, intermediaries, I want to say, and saw that there was a fit. Like we could deliver talent at scale to do that kind of work. Once that project was done, we said, okay, here's something we can go after. And then we put together an organized go to market motion for that, hired very senior people from other companies in the space, developed the capabilities, and then started talking to some of the companies that are actually developing the models themselves, like hyperscalers, that type of client. So yeah, we realized the market was there because of inbound interest, but we were very intentional about going after the big clients in this space after that.
Is there a tech stack that you then had to build out for the humans to use, or how are the humans, training the LLM specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. Initially, if you're working through a data platform, they are the platform in which you basically plug your humans. But if you want to serve the end clients directly, you do need your own platform, right? So that's something that our team built. And the funny thing is that a lot of these platforms, they're general purpose, right? So they use the same software to annotate data that is, as I mentioned, image, video, text, et cetera. When it comes to code, you need something very specific, right? Because you need to be able to prompt different models and get different responses and then run the code or debug the code or trace the code, the actions that the software engineer takes during the process. And there's not a lot of platforms out there that do this. So we had to build our own. And it's something that we use today to serve all these large clients.
When it comes to the competitive landscape for this side of the business, is Scale AI considered a competitor or no, because they're just so general purpose?
They are general purpose and they do a lot more than just annotate the data, labeling the data. They do a lot of data management for these clients. But yeah, in the sense that, they're also a vendor that helps with human data. So yeah, they're in the space.
And for you on the talent side, are they joining full time? Is it, project based? What does that look like when the humans are actually training these LLMs?
It's project based. It's hourly work, essentially. You have a lot of engineers who do that on the side, which is interesting, right? Because it's something that is task based. You can do as much or as little as you like, but the rates are really, really phenomenal, right? So it's kind of a very high end Uber like service that you're providing because you're talking to very senior talent, very experienced talent. Some of these guys, they're so good at it and they're so senior or they're so specialized in very niche skills that we end up retaining them full time. But most of the work is done on an hourly basis.
And is that something you have to train them on? Like, do you have to train them on LLM training and AI training? Like, do they have to learn that new skill, or is it more they're already pros and they just need to come in and just do the job?
No, for sure. Every project's different. Every model's different. Every, type of task is different. You have like the word that's used in the business, you have different ontologies for this business, and you essentially have to onboard these experts into different ontologies for every single project they're on. So it's very hard for one of them to work on different projects at the same time because it's so specific, right? Sometimes you're helping a model develop better looking UIs. Sometimes you're rating models against each other based on different criteria. Sometimes you are doing tracing projects in which you're logging developers' actions. So it's really different from project to project, not to mention the fact that different models have different gaps, right? So some models are looking for additional data on, I don't know, Python. Other models or other companies are looking for data on JavaScript. And, I could go on forever and name very specific skill sets that they're looking for. But yeah, it's very, very pulverized, very fragmented.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode.
What about just the idea of marketing to these foundation models, to the LLMs? I know you had a note there in the pre-interview booking, and I have to agree, and I'm sure every founder listening in agrees. Those are the highly sought after orgs that everyone knows they have a lot of money and everyone's trying to sell to them. What have you done to really stand out and get their attention and get their trust?
I think these are companies that you can't fool them or trick them. You have to play open with them. So you have to play open with the skills that you have and the skills that you don't have. So we're very transparent with these companies about what we can do and what we just can't do. Some of these companies are saying, hey, we want to do projects where you'll do some, human data for code, but also some human data for video. We have to say no to that because at some point, we're going to get caught red-handed if we try to deliver on something that we just can't. So I think that's principle number one. You have to be really clear about what you can do and what you cannot. Number two, This is a space right now that's really, really active. You've got what's happening with Scale and Meta. It's really making the whole ground beneath this industry shift. And what's happening is that there's a lot of staffing players that are essentially trying to get into that market by being workforce suppliers. That just doesn't cut it with the hyperscalers. There's too many of these companies out there for there to be any meaningful demand for somebody who's just a workforce supplier. You need to have done this before. You need to have the expertise in actual human data projects. You need to have understood what these guys are looking for in terms of quality, of volume, and, custom workflows and whatnot. So in a sense, there's this layer of consulting that you need to add on top of the actual data that you're providing them. That's really something that can help you differentiate against the competition. So the minute that we completed our first handful of projects, like early last year, we started getting that critical mass of case studies and really be able to market to these hyperscalers using knowledge. Basically, what they're looking for is thought partners. They're not looking for just another vendor that they can plug in because, there's plenty of those out there.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. When you started building out that team, then who do you put on that team, that consulting layer? Like, how do you staff that? Because this is a new world. Like, do you have to recruit them in from the foundation models themselves?
Does it look bad if I say me?
Not at all.
No, but it's true. It's me, the COO, the CTO, the head of product, the head of sales of the company. You get all your senior guys, the guys that you can trust, the guys that you've seen, learn really quickly from the get-go. Because essentially what this looked like early last year, this looked like the early stage phase of Revelo. You're starting from 0 to 1. I mean, that's not really fair to all those who are right now starting from 0 to 1, because we were building on top of a very valuable asset, which is our network of tech talent, right? But essentially, it feels a lot like an early stage startup. And in a sense, you can't hire market executives for that phase. You need to have a founding team for that phase. And what worked for us was to have direct involvement from, all those senior guys who were several years ago part of that initial founding early stage team. So yeah, it's exhausting, it's excruciating, it's stressful, but it is very much an early stage startup.
That has to be fun, though. You got to kind of build a new startup within a startup.
It's crazy fun. It's really, really fun, especially because the projects are so different among themselves. So you finish, I don't know, your fourth or fifth project, and then you're like, okay, I've got this figured out. And then out of the blue, you have this client that you've worked with so many times before, and they come to you with a request that has nothing looks nothing like anything they've asked you to do before. So this is a very interesting thing, that when you're talking to these hyperscalers, you're not talking to one company, you're talking to several different teams, and they all have different interests, different needs, and different connections and relationships that you have to build. So yeah, the learning curve is beyond steep.
I see. I guess that makes sense. These are massive orgs. It's not going to be just one team that you're talking to every time.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you have to essentially resell yourself or resell the platform every time as you move to teams? Obviously, you have some level of trust because you've worked with another team, but does it ever feel like you're just starting from scratch? Like, I've had people, different market, but who sell into the government, sell into defense, and that's been their experience, is that every single time it's restarting the process from zero.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think that's the same for everyone that's selling enterprise and has multiple accounts within the same enterprise client. I think what we do intentionally here is build a core corpus of sales collateral, like case studies and, materials that they can socialize internally, that really helps you scale that, because you're going to have to do that 50, 100 times for the same client, right? So repeating yourself in the call or in the meeting, it's kind of a given. But if you can get better at that and have, you can preempt the questions that are going to come, I think you get more efficient at that.
What was the thinking like when you just consider, launching a second product? So you have maybe that's not the right word, but we'll just use like the simple word. You have the staffing business. It sounds like that's booming. It's growing. How was that internally when you made that decision of like, all right, I'm going to split my focus and go after this new opportunity, but I'm sure you also, need to maintain the staffing side and keep that business growing and keep those customers happy. How have you thought about balancing that?
If I'm to be completely honest, what happened is that we fooled ourselves into thinking that this was going to be very similar. I mean, what's not similar? I mean, you're sourcing and vetting tech professionals to work remotely for US tech companies. If you describe it like that, it's essentially the same business. If you're doing tech projects, if you're doing LLM training, if you're doing staff augmentation, staffing, it's all the same thing with a different type of billing, right? And why do I say fooled ourselves into thinking that? Is because, initially that might look like it, but if you want to really get big with the hyperscalers, you need that layer of consulting, which has nothing to do with the core staffing business. And this really splits the market into two categories, those who develop that layer and those who don't. So what happened was that we were already generating significant revenue from that second product, as you call it, without really having to split the focus. And we essentially saw the development of this new layer of consulting and the expertise in human data as something that would help us grow within that market. So if I'm completely honest, it's kind of a sunk cost fallacy or I think there's a name for that bias. I think it's escalation of commitment or something like that. We're so deep into this and it's working. Why not put another chunk of effort in?
For the revenue split, what is that roughly? Is it like 50-50 already? Like, what are we looking at?
Last year, it got to about 25-75. So 25 human data, 75 staff augmentation and staffing. And this year it could get to 50-50.
Wow, that's wild.
For something that didn't exist, 18 months ago.
That's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Wow.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their US and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
What about, kind of long-term where this world is headed? Or I guess there's a few questions that I'll ask there. Like, where do you see this market going in terms of you just training LLMs? Like, this is probably a dumb question. Like, is there a point where the LLMs are like trained enough or that they are able to train themselves based on a certain amount of human data? Like, where does this go, 3 years from now?
Yeah, this is not a dumb question at all. I think the discussion around human data versus synthetic data is a very real one. And in my point of view is that everything that's verifiable, every project that aims to provide data around factuality for LLMs, that's a fancy way of saying anything that, you're basically telling the LLM what the right answer is. That's going to be automated at some point. I mean, we're not under any illusions that that's going to be human input forever. However, that's not everything that human data is. Human data has a big chunk of it that is related to human preference. So, for example, if you're a senior Ruby on Rails developer and you prompt a model to develop a certain feature or certain module for you, there's many ways that the answer can be given to you and they can all be factually correct, but you have your preferences. And preferences around clarity, about how verbose the answer is, how the code is structured, readability, scalability, so on and so forth. Those criteria, they are not verifiable. They're preference driven, right? And in order to measure those preferences, by definition, you need humans to tell your model what their preference is, right? So that aspect of making a model better is essentially making the model better as something that responds to human input. Right. And that's essentially human. And that's not something that's going to go away. So in a sense, evals or LLM evals are going to be a thing for as long as you want your LLM to get better to work at working with humans.
And I have to assume that's forever then, right?
Yeah, I imagine, right?
Yeah, I'd have to imagine that. At no point with this, we're done making this any better. We're content. What about on the staffing side of the business? Obviously, there's a lot of talk around AI. That's becoming your big product line there. How are you thinking about the staffing business? Do you think that a lot of these roles are going to exist in 5 years?
Yeah. So every investor I speak to, I think the first 10 minutes is about, just convincing them that developer jobs are not going to go away. Because if you only read the headlines and the PR releases from the companies that do create tools and models to write code, that's what they'll think. But the reality is that we have never seen as much demand for tech talent in the staff augmentation or software development side as we're seeing right now. The way I think about this is the following. The age of AI is changing how demand for talent works, that's for sure. But there's a ton of demand into two use cases of talent. One, as we're talking about, is LLM development, right? Making LLMs better, making them better at generating code. The other side of it is not AI development, is AI implementation. There is a ton of investment going into implementing AI at companies of all sizes. So from SMBs to startups to mid-market companies to enterprise, you have CEO mandates around AI implementation all across the board. And that investment ultimately translates into having teams working harder, faster, and more efficiently at implementing those features. So in a sense, the staffing side of Revelo is the OPEX, quote unquote, of AI. If the CapEx of AI is GPUs, eventually what you'll use as OPEX to implement that AI is tech talent, right? And the demand for that is going through the roof right now.
That's a good answer. It makes a lot of sense. Do you ever get exhausted from having to answer that?
No, and I actually like the fact that the narrative is shifting, right? So it's crazy to see how it shifts, but I don't know if you saw the whole Klarna story. Like Klarna, this bank that, automated a bunch of their CS using AI. They're very vocal about it. And then I think a few weeks ago, they admitted that they're rolling back some of those changes and they're hiring back some humans. That rollback did more for our business and for investors understanding that narrative than anything I could have said. So basically, what I'm saying, Brett, is that Lucas talking about it is one thing. Them seeing that happen in the news is a lot more powerful.
That makes sense. Just send him that news article, or I think it was a Twitter post where he announced, I'm like, oh, that stuff I was saying, because it was crazy, right? Wasn't it something like, 4,000 jobs. And then a few weeks later, they're like, we're firing Workday and Salesforce. We don't need them anymore. And everyone just started freaking out. And then, as he said, a few weeks ago, it's like, guess not.
Not bad.
That had to just be like a run up for did they file their IPO? Or I think they're going to do an IPO. That just felt like that was kind of positioning for the IPO was my takeaway there.
Yeah, maybe.
What else is on your mind as you think about the next 12 to 24 months of the business?
I think the consolidation that's going to happen. So we're very active in the M&A space. We've acquired 5 companies to date. And, there's definitely benefits of scale that accrue to the largest players in this space. You have access to more talent. You have access to more client contracts that you can upsell into. You get more efficient at allocating talent. At the end of the day, this is a marketplace. You do have 2 sides. So the larger you are, the better matches you can make. So yeah, definitely thinking a lot about consolidation. Our idea is to, at some point, raise around or look for funding partners to pursue some of the more transformational M&A deals that we have available to us. We know that we need the track record. Nobody will fund M&A if it's your first time. Fortunately, we're in the process of integrating these companies that we already acquired, and it's going pretty well. So yeah, that's definitely something that's going to happen. I don't know if you follow that closely, but when COVID hit and companies realized that they could run their teams remotely, it's really a low barrier to entry business, right? So there were so many of these nearshoring and cross-border staffing players that popped up, and most of them actually stalled at some, subscale level of revenue because go-to-market in the US is so much more expensive than what they can afford. They're not venture-backed or anything. They're just self-started. And we see a ton of opportunity there just to join forces with some of these players and gain scale and build that critical mass that will help us so much.
5 acquisition. That has to be stressful. What have you learned from the 5 acquisitions so far?
It's a cliche, but it's all about people, man. The deals that work best for us are the deals where, you feel that you can work with that person that you're joining forces with. And of course, the numbers are table stakes and you need the M&A rationale and strategy to make sense. But at the end of the day, if across the table from you, you don't have somebody that you feel that you can work with, that you share the same values with, things get really, really hard. And yeah, at some point, you just need to learn to say no and not really get enamored, with a certain deal. You have to treat it as a sales funnel. So we do have a pipeline of targets that we talk to and we nurture those relationships. And a lot of times things won't work out the first time. And then, a few quarters down the road, you might change your mind about valuation, or they might change their mind about valuation, or their numbers might change. And then, everything makes sense from a numbers point of view. But yeah, it can't be at one end of the spectrum. It's very personal because it's people, but the decision to make a deal cannot be personal. It has to be really based on, on the metrics and what the numbers say.
Final question for you. And I know we've touched on this a little bit, but let's go big picture, maybe 5 years out. What's the big picture vision for everything that you're building?
We want to be the backbone of tech talent for the age of AI. So essentially, whenever somebody is developing an LLM or an AI feature or implementing AI at their company, you want to be the go-to destination for finding the talent and the people that you need to implement that solution. So it could be full-time, it could be hourly, it could be project-based. What you can't compromise on is the quality of the talent and the expertise of that talent when developing AI. It's something that is going to be transformational for so many companies out there, and they need to have a partner who they can trust. We believe we can be that partner.
Amazing. Lucas, love this conversation. It's been a whole lot of fun. I know the audience is going to really love it as well, because so many of these things we talked about are being talked about all over Twitter, or at least in my Twitter feed. So I've really enjoyed this one. Before we wrap, if there's anyone that's just listening in that wants to follow along with you, or anyone listening that wants to work on the platform, where should we send them? Where should they go?
Yeah, happy to share my LinkedIn profile there. I'm pretty vocal there. I have a podcast myself. We interview engineering leaders from all types of companies called Tech Teams Today. So yeah, I'll drop the link for my LinkedIn profile and for the podcast.
Amazing. We'll make sure to link to that in the show notes as well. Lucas, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brett.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.